Welcome to another edition of Jared and the Brother of Jared. I am Jared,
And I'm Andy. I'm the
and you are
brother
the
of
brother of
Jared.
Jared.
Yes.
Yes, you are. Welcome. Good to see you again, Andy. How's
It was
life been going?
pretty good. How about you?
You can't complain. Super Bowl's coming up this week. Yes, we are recording this the week before the Super Bowl, and I'm getting kind of excited about that. You got the San Francisco 49ers and the Chiefs. So whoever wins, I don't care. It's going to be a good game.
Yeah, I don't really care either. Doesn't matter to me, but I'm excited for the game. I'm excited for the food.
Oh,
The day of the game. Like it's become this thing where we just eat good food and there's football on in the background.
okay, so then that begs a question. Before we get into our topic, I want to talk a little bit about this. What is your go-to Super Bowl food? What is it that you have to have for your Super Bowl get together?
I don't know about have to have. I don't want to act all entitled about it, but Callie, that's my wife, she makes the most amazing soft pretzels and
Oh,
cheese.
oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Well, I'm coming to your house for Super Bowl then.
you
That
should.
sounds really good.
You should. That'd be fun.
That would be fun. That would
Yeah,
be fun. That's a couple hours drive, right? I
right?
may or may not be in your neck of the woods for the Super Bowl. That's something I will have to discuss at a later time. But needless
Mm,
to say, I will be watching the Super Bowl this year. So
good for
I'm
you.
excited. I'm excited. All right. So with the Super Bowl, oh, and then do you have a favorite? Do you care? You said you don't care who wins, but if you had to choose 49ers or Chiefs, and who do you think will win?
Mm. Well, you have to first you have to understand this is a very uneducated opinion. I'm not super big on football or sports in general.
Gotcha.
It's a mild interest. You know what? I just kind of get the feeling that the Chiefs are going to do it again.
Oh, okay. Well, I will say San Francisco 49ers by 5.
Okay.
Um, Pulling for Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been a 49ers fan, so go Niners. But again, if the Chiefs win, I'm not going to be disappointed. They got a great head coach. Love the guy. Great
Right.
team.
Yeah.
So I don't care who wins.
I know
Anyway, that's
some people are maybe tired of the Chiefs winning. I get that, but it really doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter.
no, it doesn't. And I don't care if a team wins multiple times. I always respected the Patriots for winning all those Super Bowls with Tom Brady.
Yeah,
I respect the heck out of Tom Brady for doing what he did. I mean,
that
who
was
can go
cool.
in and win that many Super Bowls, win that many games, and be that good of a quarterback for that long?
It's fine with me.
Fine
Go
with
for
me.
it, man. Knock yourself out. Win all the Super Bowls you like.
There you go. Hey, speaking of winning, let's talk about some winning music. This is really the second episode, the second part of an episode we started last week about music. And we started out talking about the music of the 80s. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, then you can go down in the description. You can get the link to the first version. We'll link to that in the description. A great episode, I thought, where we talked about the music that shaped our lives when we were kids. We talked about Michael Jackson and Kenny Rogers and who else did we talk about on that? Do you remember some good music in the 80s for sure?
Phil Collins,
Ah,
Genesis.
Phil Collins, Genesis. That
I
was the
mean,
title of it.
there's a lot of stuff we didn't even mention. Like we didn't even talk about Tears for Fears and Everybody Wants to Rule the World and how that song has been on infinite repeat in my brain since about 1985.
Yes, that is one that comes to mind as I think about the 80s, late 80s. I guess you could get into The Cure,
Yeah.
um, those kind of bands like that. And that was another wave of music that we really didn't even talk about a whole lot. You're right. The
What
new wave music.
I personally am fascinated by pre-Nirvana alternative music. So stuff that was coming out the second half of the 80s, things like REM.
Yeah.
Um,
In excess,
sure. Yeah, that was kind of was
kind of
that new
90s.
it was kind of new wave-ish. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. Genres are tough and it's hard to classify everything. And there's all sorts of rabbit holes you can go down in different genres of music and when it began and what's in the genre and what's not in the genre, and I don't want to get in the weeds there, but generally that time period, about 1988, 89, there's
Yeah.
alternative music that's happening But I was 11, 12, so I I wasn't, it's not like I was super aware of it happening, and I've only come to appreciate it in retrospect.
Later in life where those melodies and those rhythms start to bring up memories of where you were and what you were doing when that song was playing, right? At least that's what it is for me. Like I can picture myself in the exact location with the people I was with when I hear a certain song. Isn't there a song like that? Isn't it funny how a melody can bring back a memory? That's a country song from the 2000s, of course, but it's true though. I mean, a melody can bring back a memory, and kind of like smell, it's just something that brings things to the forefront of your mind again.
It is true. And as I mentioned before, Tears for Fears is one of those things that takes me right back to a time and place. Anytime I hear Everybody Wants to Rule the World or Shout or
Yeah.
Mad World or something like that, it takes me right back there. And uh, I love that band to this day. And there was a period of time I remember when I made the mistake of expressing to my friends who all of us loved Pearl Jam. And one day I was talking about how I liked Tears for Fears, and oh man, I got so much crap for it.
Oh yeah, I can
So much
imagine.
crap for it, but I don't care. Those guys are great.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about that too, because you mentioned Pearl Jam, and I think they really came about, I think, in the early 90s, really came into popularity early 90s.
They came in
And
that wave 1991 when all those good albums were released.
yeah, so tell me what happened in that year, 91 to 95-ish somewhere, because quite frankly, and I think we talked a little bit about this before, is I was out of the country
Right.
and for 2 years, and a lot changed in those 2 years, and where we listened to a lot of the same music, the pop music, the popular music of the late 80s together, or at least that was our style in music. When I went away, I came back into the country, came back to my family, and you all were into some different stuff that I had never heard before, stuff that I just really wasn't into. So something changed around 91 to 95, somewhere in
Yeah.
that episode.
Well, talking about it now, I'm I just kind of rode the popular wave. I was never that cool kid who was into the real heavy underground music. There's people that are way cooler than me that can tell you all sorts of names of bands that, you've never heard of and everything. But I kind of like the stuff. I like the stuff that I saw on MTV and that I heard on the radio. And really, I think the catalyst for the big change was just MTV. Because in that day, it's not like today where you have all these, streaming options and everything. Everybody had this shared experience of you come home from school, you turn on MTV, or maybe you listen to the local alternative station. These stations change formats overnight from, uh, you know, top 40 to alternative or something like that. And I think MTV was really the catalyst for it. Somebody at MTV just decided that grunge was going to be the new thing that they pushed 24/7, and that's what we got, and I liked it. I just smells like Teen Spirit, Nirvana,
Mm.
Pearl Jam with their video Jeremy, Soundgarden, Rusty Cage, and then the Smashing Pumpkins, that they had Gish that came out in, what was that? The Gish comes out, and that one kind of flies under the radar, and then Nirvana, and then there's the whole grunge explosion, and then Smashing Pumpkins released Siamese Dream, and so Siamese Dream was like my first exposure to the Smashing Pumpkins, and I had that on cassette and I wore it out. Oh, this is
Oh,
one
so
of
you
my
were still on cassette at that time. You hadn't moved over to
yeah.
CD.
No, like most people were kind of getting on the CD back bandwagon, but you know what it was like in our family. We always
We were
lagged a
behind.
little bit behind, and so I was still listening to cassettes, and I remember I had Pearl Jam versus on cassette.
Uh-huh.
I wore that one out. That's Pearl Jam's second album. Siamese Dream on cassette. Literally wore it out. Like
Yeah.
literally got to the point where it's like the quality of it started to diminish because I had just like played it over and over and over again.
Funny story about cassettes and the quality of cassettes. I remember being in high school, and this was around 1990, and a good friend of mine had started to get into CD. And I remember we went to the store because he wanted to buy this portable CD player. And I'm like, what's the big deal with CDs? It's the same sound quality. I don't see the difference. CD, cassette, it's not that big a difference.
Yeah, I
Yeah, there
remember
was.
that. Yeah, I guess there was a difference, but in hindsight, it's uh whatever. I recently, started collecting cassettes a little bit. I need
Uh-huh.
to get a decent cassette player. I think that's the issue. And I notice a difference in quality. There is a lot more noise on those cassettes. But it seems like in the later years of cassettes, like the quality was improving on there. I don't know. I think there was some sort of digital
Dolby
audio tech.
Digital.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, or something like that. And it was noticeably a little better than the earlier cassettes, you know?
it was. You could still hear the fuzz though. So it was kind
Yeah.
of, mm. but
But
that was
that
funny.
might
I
be
look back on that
that
experience now and I just laugh at myself thinking,
yeah.
what do you mean the quality's the same? There's no comparison. And then you compare CDs with streaming nowadays, and oh boy,
Yeah.
you know. But so tell me about this grunge. What was it that drew you to it? I mean, was it just MTV and that it was popular,
You
or there
know,
must have been some aesthetic to it that really drew
that
you in?
there was kind of an aesthetic to it. And I think, in hindsight, I think part of it was just the way that whoever was making those videos and putting them on MTV, they all had a similar look to them. There was a way of doing things, and it just felt cool because instead of like the hairband thing where you
Hmm.
had these videos where there were girls everywhere in skimpy outfits, and it seems like the colors were brighter. It seems like there was a lot of bright reds and bright yellows and just all this
Blacks.
yes, all this stuff happening in those hairband videos. And then all of a sudden you started seeing these grunge videos, and like the lighting was darker, there were more earthy colors. It just had this different vibe to it that just felt cooler. It felt a little, I mean, a little more real, I guess. It
Yeah, I
wasn't
was just going to say a
real.
little more realistic, right?
Yeah, a little more in comparison to what came before it, a little more down to earth, more realistic. Well, that there's a downside to it too, because if you listen to a lot of that grunge for a long time, you start to realize it's kind of depressing music.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's not necessarily real either, you know?
yeah, right. I
Um,
remember, and I don't know if you remember this conversation that you had with Dad, but he and I talked about this style of music um, shortly after I returned to the country, and we were talking about you and Adam and everybody, and they're listening to all this grunge music. And I told him, I said, I don't really care for it. I don't get it. I don't understand this music. I've later come to appreciate it for what it was, and I do like some of the sounds. But he recalled a conversation that he had with you about that style of music, and he asked you why do you even like this music? It's angry, it's kind of harsh. And he said, something really stuck with me. He goes, yeah, it may seem kind of depressing and harsh, but in the end it always resolves, and everything is resolved. And that's viewed both in terms of the storyline but also in the chords, and everything's okay. And
well,
that was, it made me think and pause for a moment.
I don't remember that conversation, but that does make some sense to me because it seems like, and if you trace like the careers of some of those people, I'm thinking of like Eddie Vedder, and I'm thinking
Yeah.
of Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corgan. Um, that's kind of their story. Like when they were younger, they were kind of this really troubled character, just really kind of down. But over the years, um, like I know Pearl Jam started making music that was a lot more positive. Not
Mm.
always. A lot of their stuff is kind of political and cynical and stuff like that. But like they're capable of making music that's just kind of happy. You know, they're
Yeah.
not like super depressed all the time. Same with Smashing Pumpkins. Like there's something in it that has become it's you listen to their current stuff and some of it seems a little more hopeful, a
Hmm.
little more lighthearted, not always, just generalizations. Now, of course there are other tragic stories in um that genre of music.
Yeah.
The number of suicides and
Drug overdoses and
deaths
things.
is
Yeah.
just horrible. That's horrible. But that's not the totality of the experience. There were I just like that it's subject matter that was kind of a little more cerebral and sometimes it's nice to listen to music that just is just happy-go-lucky, lighthearted and stuff. But sometimes it's nice to listen to stuff that gives you a little more to think about. And I felt like
Yeah,
there was a lot of that going on in
for
that
sure.
in that era. My favorite, though, if you're interested.
Yeah. So tell me, what is your favorite? Yeah, in that genre, is there a song that just really calls out to you that is your favorite song?
So, okay, at the time, I was obsessed with Pearl Jam. Like
Yes.
at one time in high school, my entire wardrobe was Pearl Jam t-shirts.
Yeah.
Um,
Pearl Jam t-shirts covered with flannels. Yeah.
yes, as I've gotten older, my favorite grunge band is Soundgarden
Oh, they're
by
good.
far.
Yeah.
Insanely good. And it like there were just elements of like prog in there with the odd time signatures and stuff. It's really sophisticated stuff. Great, great music. Um, and also the Smashing Pumpkins. Um,
They had a unique sound to them, I remember. I didn't listen to a whole lot of them, but I do remember thinking, wow, these guys are different. They're very unique and they have a sound all their own. And I appreciated that.
I think the Smashing Pumpkins always also come from a more kind of classic rock and progressive rock kind of tradition. And they get lumped in with grunge or whatever. Like I don't even know what grunge is exactly. When I hear grunge, it's like, oh, you mean those Seattle bands?
See,
Those kind of
exactly. And if you look at the history of Seattle or grunge music, that's what they always mention. It was created and really made big in the Northwest, Portland, Seattle,
right.
etc.
And the Smashing Pumpkins are from Chicago, so disqualified. Same with Stone
Just
Temple
they're not
Pilots. They
grunge.
were from what, San Diego or something like that. So they're not grunge either. But those bands get lumped in with that genre. Stone Temple Pilots and the Smashing Pumpkins, they get lumped in with the bands um Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam. Soundgarden, Nirvana, and Pearl Jam were kind of like the more popular things, and there's a lot of differences between those bands.
Yeah.
Oh, Alice in Chains. I should mention Alice in Chains as well.
Yeah.
They were the other big one. But then there's the lesser known ones like Mudhoney,
Mud
right? Have you
Honey.
ever
See,
heard of
that's
it?
one I've never heard
See,
of.
that one
Mud
just
Honey?
yeah, you want to hear grunge? Listen to some Mudhoney.
Mud Honey.
That's
Okay.
grunge, man. That's grunge. Yeah.
Fascinating. See, and while you were listening to grunge in the 90s, you know what I was listening to?
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. What were you listening to in the
I
90s,
wasn't
Jared?
listening to a whole lot of music at that point, but what I did listen to, what became really big in the 90s,
Hmm.
aside from grunge, there was another style of music that became really popular, and it was really the rise of country music.
Now, would you say I refer to that as like pop country?
Yes, I think you're exactly right. That's exactly what it is because it's not country in the true sense of the word, like Alabama, um, or any of those classic country bands. Willie
Hmm.
Nelson, that's country, right?
Right.
But it was Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
It was Diamond Rio is one of my all-time favorites
Uh-huh.
from the 90s. Brooks and Dunn.
Right. See,
Great,
I know all these
great fun
names.
music.
They were crazy popular bands. They were like it was country, but it was kind of like the big rock band aesthetic though,
It was a
a
little
little bit.
bit because they made themselves out to be bigger than life, right?
They had
So there
fireworks
really
on
was a true
stage and
musical quality to bands like Diamond Rio,
hmm.
Vince Gill.
Hmm.
Vince Gill, man, what a great writer and a great vocalist. It took me a little bit of getting used to that voice because it's kind of a higher pitched voice. But once you listen to his vocals and you listen to the story behind the music, I really love the guy. And Garth Brooks, yeah, he was the entertainer, right?
Yeah.
Um, Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. In fact, um, I was at a concert. Um, Tim McGraw was the headliner, and Faith Hill was an accompanying act. And this was before they were married. Uh,
Ah,
so
and
that
you,
was fascinating to hear a little while later that, hey, yeah, we're a thing and we're getting married.
oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say that one of the things that like I have to admit I do enjoy kind of the tabloid kind of stories behind musicians and celebrities. It's something I've gradually discovered.
Really?
I like a little bit of celebrity gossip, and there was plenty of that with the bands that I listened to, like
Oh,
Pearl
yeah.
Jam and their crusade against Ticketmaster, and how all those bands always put up this front like they didn't really want to be famous. Like,
Right, right.
and it
Yes, they
was
did. That's how they made their money. That's how they toured the world.
right. But there's some of that in every genre, like Tim McGraw and
Right.
Faith Hill, and I
Yeah,
guess.
that was fun music though, right? It wasn't anything you take too seriously. It was just good fun. And the thing I really liked about Diamond Rio was their vocal harmonies. Um, they're they're just masters at that. Same with Vince Gill. I could think of others, just not off the top of my head, but there was some good fun music, I think, in the country pop era of the 90s. I enjoyed.
Yeah. No, no, there's stuff that like I'll hear it once in a while. And I was never super into that music, but I'll hear it and there's a little bit of nostalgia involved if you hear like I don't know, Boot Scootin' Boogie or something
Yeah.
like that. You hear it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I remember that song."
I remember driving my 1989 Ford Ranger through the snow up to Island Park for some, I don't know what I was doing, snowmobiling with friends or something like that, and listening to Brooks and Dunn. Man, that was awesome. That was just fun.
So that reminds me of another thing, if I might interject here. Do you find this is something that has happened with me? There is music from that era in the 90s that at the time when it was on the radio, I wouldn't be caught dead listening
Yes.
to it. It wasn't cool. But now I hear it and I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." And
Yeah.
I'll like actively listen to it.
Oh yeah, that's we talked about stuff like The Cure, Duran
Uh-huh.
Duran, etc. Yeah, that's me right now. I couldn't stand like The Cure. I didn't like U2.
Uh-huh.
But now
Now you
if that
do.
comes on the radio and I'm driving down the street, and yes, I'm a Gen Xer that listens to the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stop, I turn it up, and I just love it because it's nostalgic to me,
There,
which
yeah.
it's just kind of strange to know that when you're listening to the oldies station on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
you're listening to 80s music
Right.
and early
Well,
90s. It's crazy.
if I may, there's music that for whatever reason I thought it was too cool for it back then, but now I'll seek it out sometimes. I'm talking about those bands that were just on alternative radio during the 90s. Stuff like the Gin Blossoms,
Oh yeah.
Better Than Ezra, Third
This
Eye Blind. I wouldn't be caught
Third Eye
dead
Blind,
listening to
Blink
Third Eye
182.
Blind at
Yeah.
the time. Oh, Blink 182. And see, this is another thing. My wife's a little younger than me, right? And the kid's just a little bit younger than me. Um, they didn't listen to grunge.
No, they
They
listen to
got
ska.
well, ska was the thing for a while, and then pop punk, the whole pop punk thing. So they started listening to bands like NoFX,
Okay.
and then they started listening to Blink 182. They liked Green Day too.
Green Day, yeah.
And this was all the stuff that was just like the kids a little bit younger than me. And it took me for a while. It took me a while to start to appreciate that stuff. I didn't even like Blink 182 until after I got married. And they were on maybe their third or fourth album. And then I
Yeah.
heard it. And Travis Barker was the drummer. And Travis Barker to this day is one of my favorite drummers. He's the one who kind of hooked me into Blink 182 because I started listening to him. I'm like, oh, that's legit. Like this, that's really good.
Yeah.
And I got
Yeah.
into it that way.
That's
but I didn't
interesting.
like it at
I'd
first.
love to like hear from anybody who comes across this to hear like who are your favorite stars in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. Um, I just want to know if am I the weird one for liking who I like, or did everybody like those guys? You know what I'm saying? Did everybody like Brooks and Dunn in the 90s like I did?
Well, there
Uh,
were it's I don't know about everybody, but there are plenty of people who like Brooks and Dunn in that era. There's plenty of people who like Garth Brooks, and to this day, I know people who, they went and saw him recently. Last time he was touring and he came through here. Like it doesn't. There's uh, when you're a teenager, it's so easy for you to just like you hate the stuff that the wrong people listen to, and you love anything that the right people listen to, and it's kind of silly. And nowadays, it's like, who cares? You can like Brooks and Dunn and Garth Brooks, and I can like uh
yeah,
Pavement. Pavement. Have you ever heard of Pavement, Jared?
Pavement?
Pavement.
No, no
So
clue.
they're another one of those bands. It was like they're they're like indie rock. And at the time it's like I was mildly aware of them, and then it took me a long time to like get into them and listen to all of their stuff. I'm a huge Pavement fan.
All right.
Um but that's old stuff now. It's old, and it's fascinating that with like the streaming services, you literally have everything ever recorded, ever released at your fingertips, and so you can go down these rabbit holes, and it's like time doesn't exist anymore. Like if I want to, I can listen exclusively to music that occurred before 1994 or whatever, and then just hear that all the time if that's what I
Yeah.
want. And sometimes I do.
Isn't that fascinating? Now, so we're kind of running out of time here, but now I want to get your opinion. And this speaks to this question about where you are now with your music. Um, Now as I'm in my older years, I can appreciate anything from the late 70s through the 80s, through the 90s, some even into the 2000s. I admit it, I like Taylor Swift. At the same time, a few years ago, uh, I really found myself fascinated and really interested in the symphony. And I must admit to you that going to the symphony is one of my favorite things to do. I love it. And again, I think this speaks to the power of music, where the sounds and the feelings that that music evokes um, is just it's otherworldly. It's just an awesome experience to see and to experience how sounds and the way that that's expressed um, communicates to your soul. I just love
Yeah.
it. And so I'll listen to everything from Bach and, take your favorite European, classical composer down to, 70s and 80s music. I don't know if that's called musical maturity or but I see myself now liking every genre, the good music in every genre.
I took for fun, my last semester of college, I needed another elective, and I took a class on music recording technology. Something I was always interested in, and I took a class on it. And that kind of gave me the perspective that no matter what you're recording, no matter what the music is, there is something you can appreciate about it. And you can go into it with an open mind, and you can just kind of try to wrap your head around what it is that people like about it.
Yeah.
And if you do that, it's not very long before you yourself uh genuinely enjoy it, no matter what the genre is or anything, be it classical or hip hop or um heavy metal. Like my kids are really into like metal and hardcore, just like heavier, screamy stuff, right?
Yeah.
We would just horrify our parents.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, that kind of heavy stuff was never my cup of tea. But like the more I'm around it, more I hear it, the more I can wrap my head around what it is that they like about it, and I start to genuinely appreciate at least elements of it.
Well, there's the invitation. Go out and listen to some music that you don't normally listen to and get to know more about it. And chances are you're gonna like at least something about it. It may
If
not be every song, but
you want
every
to.
genre, there's got to be some piece of every genre that's gonna speak to you in some way or another.
Yeah. No, I
Fantastic.
I absolutely believe that. But you have to want to. It's just well, what are you looking for? If you want to find enjoyment in something, you'll find it. And if you want to just tear it apart and just see how awful it is, you'll find that too.
Oh yeah. Yep. I can tear apart lots of music as we have over the years, I'm
And it
sure.
that's kind of fun to do sometimes, but
Yeah, right.
I don't know. The older I get, the less I want to do that,
Yeah,
you
let
know?
people be them and express themselves how they want to express it. If you want to be
Right.
angry, that's fine. Go into rage, metal,
Right.
whatever.
Well, it's kind of like when we were kids, it was cool for us to make fun of the stuff that our parents listened to, you know? And seems like there was always this competition. Is our music better? Is your music better?
But our music
Um,
was better than the 50s.
I actually really like the 50s. I like the
Oh man.
60s too. I like the stuff from that era. I'm a huge fan of the Beach Boys and the Beatles. I like the early Elvis stuff, Chuck Berry.
Strawberry Alarm Clock.
Um, trying to remember what they did. Strawberry Alarm Clock. Such a
I don't
weird
know,
name.
but I remember that was a music my, dad listened to. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
remember him bringing up that band name and I'm like, that's the stupidest name ever. No
right.
offense to anybody who likes Strawberry Alarm
Or
Clock.
how about the Everly Brothers?
The Everly Brothers. Yeah,
They're
there you go.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Buddy Holly. There's a lot of good stuff. Oh, Dad really liked the Kingston Trio.
Kingston Trio. Yeah. Yeah. He had
Yeah.
that on vinyl.
Yeah. I dig it. It's good
Yeah.
stuff.
Creedence Clearwater Revival. I think
I
he had one of those
love
too.
Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah, not bad at
Love
all,
them.
right?
Yeah, it's
Anyway, so
good.
we've talked about a lot of music. Go out and explore some of the music that you like. Enjoy it. No one's going to criticize you for it unless we do, and then just don't take it seriously.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's people out there who are just like criticizing us. Hey, you left out this, you
Absolutely.
left out that. You haven't mentioned anything from this genre or that genre. And you know what? You're
You're right.
right. Because we are who we are and we have had the experience that we've had, and that's just what we've heard. And I'm not judging you for what you listen to, and I'd hope that you don't judge me for what I listen to. Like,
And if you do, I don't care.
yeah,
Whatever. Get over it.
right.
All right. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. This has been another great episode of Jared and the Brother of Jared. I'm Jared,
I'm the brother of Jared.
and look forward to another exciting episode. Who knows what we're going to talk about? We'll have to come up with another topic of the day. Maybe it'll be one episode, maybe it'll be two episodes. I don't know, but we'll talk about something
Could
exciting.
be
Thanks for joining us,
anything.
everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.